Hello everyone and welcome back to the Scrapyard. I'm your host Nathan Mulepolder, joined here by Taylor.
Howdy.
And Xavier.
I just read a news story just telling me that news is going to happen. You know, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Why? Alright, so why read a news story if they're just going to be like, news is going to be announced? Why don't you just wait until the news is announced?
No, that's fair. We're going to be talking about the Overwatch League. Specifically, we are going to be talking about Stage 4, Week 4, the teams that didn't make it to the playoffs, and we will be talking about the Kit Kat Rivalry Weekend. If you want to follow us on social media, you can go ahead and do that on Instagram or Twitter at ScrapyardMedia. It's a good place to check us out if you want to. You can also find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, especially where you're listening right now, so... You know, in case you want to go somewhere else, you can do that. You can even find us on YouTube, but, you know, YouTube sometimes is weird with what you can close the app with and not. So, hey, where you're listening to right now is probably fine. Additionally, if you want to play games with us, you can do that on Xbox or PlayStation and maybe even Steam at Scrapyard Media. Let's get into this episode. Roll that intro. Do you come from a land down under? So, a couple of teams had their season end this week. Rest in peace. Let's talk about that. Toronto Defiant went 8-20.
Yeah, the Defiant had, like... I don't know if it's, like, the biggest slide that a team has ever had.
Yeah.
But going from the playoffs in Stage 1... to an 0-7 stage and a 1-win stage to close out the season is
not the best.
Tragic. It felt like, you know, I remember in Stage 1, it was like, wow, Toronto's actually shockingly good. I didn't expect, like, I don't think anyone really expected Toronto to be that good in terms of putting up, like, a 5-2, making the playoffs and actually being a high seed. And then the shock just, like, ran through them. And then it was just like a steady decline from there. And I don't know if, you know, Stage 3 was the bottom, going 0-7, or even if this stage is kind of the bottom, going 1-6. Because at least, you know, last stage, you kind of had the excuse of like, well, Stellar's gone, IM37 isn't really working out, your whole team's kind of in flux, then you bring Logix and Mangachu in, and it's like, alright, well, we have to work them in, and Gods wasn't really playing, you know, as well as Gods kind of did this stage, and everything just felt really
disjointed.
In flux.
Yeah.
And then this stage, you kind of expected, alright, like, y'all know what you're doing. You know, you've had a stage to kind of, and a few weeks to integrate these people in, and nothing clicked. They just looked... They had moments where Logix would do really well, and, you know, I think Gods was kind of like a breakout on their team.
Yes.
But in general, it was just like, you watch them and there was just nothing exciting happening in their games. It was just kind of like a team playing Overwatch, losing to other teams playing better Overwatch.
Yeah.
They never really felt exciting. I think at the end of this season, the Toronto Defiant are going to be... You know, when we look back, they're going to be like the most forgettable team of this season because they didn't do anything.
They're already really forgettable. Like, it's not like we had Florida, which was, you know, kind of the same case as last year. They went 6-22, 4-3 in Stage 4 though, so they won some games.
Yeah, once they got to play what they're good at, and they found Gargoyle. Things started actually looking up. They didn't, you know, take the league by storm.
No.
But definitely getting to be back in Stage 4 with 2-2-2 and having Saya player just be miraculous, and then having Gargoyle come in and be a solid number 2 player on the team. They actually had some excitement. And I think Florida wasn't really forgettable just because we all kind of knew.
They've been around since the inaugural season.
Yeah.
So it's like Florida, we kind of know comes in and looks kind of like off, but then especially now in Stage 4, they looked at least like they're getting who they need in what places they need. And that's a good thing for them.
But Toronto is on the other end of just being forgettable, and they've done nothing. You know, there aren't. I mean, making the playoffs in stage one is cool, but that's so long ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it's completely kind of dampened by the fact that they had such a terrible season after that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, stage one
Sure.
just
Yeah.
feels like a fluke
Yeah.
instead of,
Mhm.
oh wow, like they have potential. Now you just look at them and you're like, I just don't think about you. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
about you. I don't think about your future. You feel irrelevant to
Yeah.
this league. And so they have a lot of work to do in the off season
Yeah.
to get better, because it's pretty depressing.
And Washington Justice had the same score, 8-20, but they went 6-1 in stage 4.
It's like a tale of two teams.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they flipped it around completely. I mean, this is the team that 4-0'd Vancouver Titans.
Yeah, 6-1 stage.
Yes.
They looked like one of the best 5 teams in the league.
Yeah.
And with Washington, on the other end of Toronto just being forgettable, I think Washington is going into next season. They're going to be the one team everybody's like, what is Washington going to do?
Yeah.
Because Washington finally got to play what they're good at, and they looked incredible.
Yes.
Corey looked incredible. Sam looked really good, really good. And then
Sure.
Arc,
Yeah.
Guido, Sleepy, like their entire support line is solid. And so I think Corey, Stratus, definitely keep them. I mean, Guido, Arc, Sleepy is always good. And then Sansan and Janice were serviceable tanks. And especially
Yeah.
Sam, who ended up actually being one of the best like off tanks in the league compared to how he was in GOATS, where he was just bad.
There. Yeah,
He
he
was
was
just
just
bad.
there.
Mhm.
I think Washington had that redemption arc. And Washington Justice is constantly like the one saying how they're the anime team. They're the ones that get the redemption arc. And I think that shines true for them, because like they're all the kind of the what I would call misfits from other teams getting all put together and then like really shining as a whole. Because like Sleepy came from shock halfway through. Corey is kind of a misfitty kind of character. Stratus is kind of, they're all like the dorkiest of dudes, and then they came together and like really shown as like a whole group.
So what you're saying is next season is when that golden wind piano comes in and they just start fucking popping off.
Yeah,
Probably.
probably.
Although I think with Washington, I feel like there's room for like chilling out with them.
Sure.
Because I think throughout the stage, people have been talking about Washington like, wow, they
Like they're
could be the
gods.
best team in the league. They're top 5, blah, blah, blah. But I still firmly believe that over the course of a season, or maybe over the course of like a half a season, if we really got to see them play, the weird decision making and kind of awkward coaching and maybe some of the players not being truly great,
Yeah.
I think that stuff would start coming forward after a while. I mean, we saw it with their last game against Atlanta, where they kind of made Corey a non-factor because Atlanta basically said, all right, Corey, we're just going to not give you what you want. We're not going to play into your Widow, Hanzo whole deal.
Yes.
We are going to force you to switch. And then when Corey switched, Washington couldn't really get anything going. Because
Correct.
for all that Washington is great, it's kind of because of Corey. It's because
Yeah.
of Corey is so incredible. But when Atlanta forced Corey to be uncomfortable and made him switch, they fell off the rails.
That's where everything went
And
down.
so, obviously Corey's great.
Yeah.
And, he's going to be a linchpin of this team. But it's important to understand that, like, Corey has limitations. Sam has limitations. Giannis definitely has limitations. And even Stratus has limitations. So it's important to realize that I think after a while teams are going to figure them out.
And they need something that can be a surprise factor. They need something where...
This was their surprise factor.
Yeah.
Like, wow, Washington suddenly...
Yeah, but
popped off.
I'm saying, like, they need something where when they come into next season, like, one of these players that is like, oh, I can't wait to see Corey do this on, like, his niche character, to then switch over to something else and, like, surprise everybody and be like, oh, see, now they have that flexibility that you see with other teams.
Yeah, Corey needs to be like something like an EQO.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, I feel like right now he's, closer to like a Carpe, where he's like elite sniper. He's really good at other things, but like his bread and butter is, like that sniper play.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the roles he just kind of is shaky at. But I think Corey needs to feel more like, Carpe's partner, EQO, because EQO is one of those players that can play everything. And
Very much so.
with Corey being your best player and Corey being the guy that really makes your team work, I think he needs to be versatile enough where you can tell Corey, if they're countering you, if they're not playing into your game, you can switch to something else and you're just as good.
Mm-hmm.
You're just as good at Tracer, you're just as good at Sombra, you're just as good at Pharah. All those little things where you can really maximize your best player to his capabilities instead of having Corey get played out of the game because the other team isn't having it.
Yeah, somebody figured it out. And then there's Paris, which finished 14th in all the teams, and they had an 11-17 season.
They had an okay season, especially for a new team with like, a roster that wasn't really. I mean, at the beginning of the season, they were claimed to be a GOATS team.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you look at the roster, and they weren't.
They were not.
I think
They were never a GOAT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
I think something that's interesting is we've talked about how London stayed just good enough to stay afloat. I feel like Paris kind of tried to do the same thing, but they didn't succeed at it. Like, they had all the tools they needed. They had people that could have done what they needed them to do, but when it came down to it, they didn't have it strong enough. And I think that's what their downfall was, because as soon as it switched over, especially like in stage 3 where it switched over to a different kind of Sombra goats and like different, heading towards a different meta, you could see that they were picking up. And if it was just them, if they could have just clicked onto that easier in like the first 2 stage, like goats, the first 2 stages, it would have helped them probably be placed higher.
Yeah, Soon could have just figured out how to play Zarya.
Yeah.
Or if they could have figured out that, if they could have, not saying if you give up on Soon, but if they'd given up on Soon earlier,
Yeah.
because they definitely gave up on Soon stage 3 and towards the end of stage 2.
Yes,
If they just gave up on him sooner and realized, all right, Soon just isn't feeling this,
Maybe they should have gave up on him sooner.
Exactly. And so if you run like, Finzi, who was great in his role.
I just looked into the camera. There's no camera there.
Exactly.
I looked into your hearing holes through the mic there, guys.
Yeah, but like if you figured out like the Finzi, Danye, like the rest of their DPS line, Aiden Goats, it was like if you figured that out, then they maybe could have gotten a few more wins.
Mm-hmm.
But they're in a decent spot because obviously Soon and Shadowburn, they're solid players. I think Cruz is perfectly serviceable, and you're just, you keep a good support player like that. But you kind of look at the rest of their team, and I'm not entirely sure about like the EU contender scene, but similar to how Seoul will probably have like first dibs on all like the contenders Korea players, just simply being from Seoul, having a lot of money, doing all that work. I think Paris is going to have first dibs on a lot of the EU contenders players, and they'll end up picking up like the best free agents and just bolster their team. Because, their tank line hasn't been necessarily the greatest. Ben Best has had moments, but I don't think he's ever looked like a world beater. So they'll just pick up somebody from contenders and bolster their roster. But really with Paris, they just struggled to like put a win streak together.
Yeah.
They just never really... They would win a game, look really good, and then lose 2, win 1, lose 2, win 2, but then lose like 3 in a row. They never really put together a really good win streak, like some of the other teams above them have, where they maybe put together like 3 wins in a row, and that's a good cushion.
Yes.
So they really struggled putting those things together.
Yeah, I agree. It's just Paris's. It was just they relied on Soon, like you said.
Yeah,
And
they needed Soon to be a monster,
and he ended up not being a monster.
Yeah. But then during this meta, he became he outplayed.
He became the
pretty
monster that they needed.
Yeah.
I just feel like because of his name, and like him and Shadowburn's name, they had put them in so early.
Yeah.
And that was their downfall. And if it wasn't that, it would have been fine.
And I mean, you know, I understand not giving up on him because, you know, you don't want to just give up on your player right away. You want to force him to play these moments.
You want to have a face.
And see if he gets better.
Yeah.
See, all right, because like Soon sucks for a little bit, but then suddenly Soon figures it out, and then you're right on. I think they just could have pulled the trigger on Soon a little earlier and just been like, hey man, when things switch up, we'll give you playing time, but right now you're not really working out. And maybe they could have got a few extra wins and messed around and been in play-ins, but it didn't happen. But they're another team that is going to be good next season.
Oh,
yeah,
definitely.
they're another team that's going to be good next season. I think the biggest problem they had is they were thinking like Soon's good, so if we just put it on cruise control, we'll
You've
be
been
good.
struggling these past 2 episodes.
Oh my.
We'll be
Christ.
good. Hey, Taylor didn't even catch that, so we're
I
fine.
did.
You've
I
been
looked at you
struggling.
like this.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at you. I was looking at Xavier because he always has the
I don't
better
know if that
reactions.
dignified a reaction.
The point is they were on cruise control. I'm still making the joke. They kept it with Soon, didn't work out. But you know what will work out? This ad right here. This episode is brought to you by this embarrassing thing I just found right here. This is a thing our grandma was sewing for Taylor back when she was into anime. Specifically, it is what appears to be a future Kiyo Soma plush. Throw in other anime character names, like characters from Death Note. This has been brought to you by Embarrassment. And now, let's get ready to rival weekend. That was rough. Let's talk about it. Rival weekend's coming up. It's going to be pretty exciting. We got a couple of interesting games,
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've realized the past several podcasts, I feel like we've all said Kit Kat Rivalry Weekend, and I just want to say the power, the power of capitalism and branding on us, where there's no reason for us to have ever said Kit Kat Rivalry Weekend, because we literally could have just said Rivalry Weekend
Yeah.
and been totally fine. But the fact that we have to throw Kit Kat in there, like I've thought about Kit Kat more in the past several weeks than I have in 2-3 years.
That's true.
That's fair. You know, fun fact about Kit Kats, they're made out of fucking Kit Kat. Like, they mess those shits up and just throw them back in the mix. That's how they make the wafers.
It doesn't help that, like, every
I
time I
know.
look through, like, Instagram and I see LA, like, the Valiant,
Yeah.
every fucking thing it has,
Kit
like,
Kat.
Kit Kats. They've been signing Kit Kats for, like, 2 months now.
So if we start drinking Bud Light on this podcast, it's because of the Overwatch League.
Is that the official beer of the Overwatch League?
Yes. They have a
Is this
happy
an
hour.
ad?
Wait, is that actually?
Yeah, they have an
You
ad.
literally said their tagline. Drink Bud Light.
Gross.
And let's get right back out of this ad. And our first rivalry is Boston versus New York, going head to head.
Okay, so Boston and New York, they've played 7 times. New York has won 5 of their matchups. There was 6 in the inaugural season and then 1 at this season.
Yeah, this isn't really a... In terms of, like, competition right now in this life, this isn't a rivalry.
Yeah, nah.
Because New York is simply better than Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And Boston doesn't really... Because New York is simply better than Boston. They've been better than Boston in the first season. But Boston in the first season is different than Boston this
Now.
season. Because of the first season, Boston, they were a playoff team.
Yes.
They were looking like one of the best teams in the league. And they seemed like a team that kind of couldn't be messed with.
Yeah.
And then this season comes along, and they trade all their players.
Yeah.
They get rid of everybody. I mean,
Everyone.
you look at some of those season 1 games, and you're like, that person's on a different team, that person's on a different team,
Yeah.
that person's on a different team. Like, I think the only person on one of their teams was, like, Axiom
Yeah.
in
Yes.
support, and then the rest of the roster was just gone.
Changed.
And so that's kind of weird. But New York, on the other hand, and like these two teams do contrast because New York is pretty much the same group from the first season. Like, they just kind of rolled it back and kept everybody together with, some people leaving, but their core is the same.
Yeah, and there's, like, a definite sports history between the rivalry, which I'm sure you know more of than I do, because I'm not the sports person. But I don't feel like it reflects these two teams in this league. I feel like New York has more of a rivalry with London.
Yeah, for sure. I think London and New York is a natural way you look at their rivalry.
That's been a rivalry since 1776, bro. Like, it's a thing.
It's deep. And with they're in the same division, so they're going to play twice a year every time, and all their games are, yes, they've had some stomps, but all their games have been compelling, and they had one of the best games earlier this year of the entire season.
Yeah.
The 3-2 matchup. So...
But I know historically that, like, it goes back in sports universe.
Yeah.
Even further
in
than,
sports
like,
universe.
Even further than, like, the Red Sox and the Yankees.
Yeah.
Like,
so,
it goes back even.
Like, this is the kind of deal where this is the localization thing coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Where, as we said before, like, Philly fans will just be like, I'm rooting for Philly because they're from Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
This entire rivalry weekend, and I'm not even going to say outside of the Shock in Vancouver, because I think they had that game planned. They had that game already on the docket before the weekend was even a thing, you know? So, every single one of these rivalries, except for Atlanta's, for some reason, are based off of actual kind of regional and sports rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, Yankees-Red Sox is an absurd rivalry.
It's the biggest.
But, and similar to this way, the Yankees are simply historically better than the Red Sox. And the New York Excelsior are simply better than the Boston Uprising.
They're one of our fan base. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. Like, there goes all of our fans. But, it's true. And
But
that rivalry has a history, and it has influenced literally every other sports team that has every other sports league that has a Boston and a New York.
They're
it's
rivals.
influenced that feeling,
That dynamic.
So if you look in, like, the NBA, it's less deep, but there is a certain pride between Celtics and Knicks fans where, they do kind of hate each other. But it's simply because of this baseball thing. And then, obviously, the rivalry kind of extends a little bit further to football, where I think the rivalry has taken more actual relevance to, like, people my age. Because I think a lot of people my age simply, one, don't watch baseball.
Yeah.
And two, have more connection with football. And obviously it's the Patriots versus the Giants.
Yeah.
Where, and this is similarly reflected to the Overwatch League, where, the Patriots were the best team in the league until the Giants came and fucked it up.
Yes.
In 2007, the Patriots almost went 19-0. They were 18-0 going into the Super Bowl, and Eli Manning derped his way into winning a Super Bowl in 2007, and then they matched up again in 2011, and the same thing happened. Eli Manning derped his way into another Super Bowl win, and, it's just stoked more fuel to the fire, and, before Patriots games, they would just talk shit about the Yankees just because.
The Yankees?
Yeah, just because.
Are you sure you don't mean the Giants?
Yes. No, they talked shit about the Red Sox. No, Yankees. Boston, New England Patriots.
Yeah, but Yankees are...
New York.
Yeah, they're a baseball team, not a football team.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
They literally would just talk shit about the New York baseball team.
Okay,
simply for the fact that it's the New York baseball team.
Yeah.
And so these two regions
hate each other for no reason.
Beef. And so it's natural to bring this into the Overwatch League, where, now it's an LA crowd, so it doesn't have that same feeling. But when you're playing in home games, New York...
That's just going to go crazy.
Yeah, you're just going to see on the marquee, New York is facing Boston, or Boston is facing New York, and there's going to be some issues there. It's going to feel like Houston versus Dallas at the homestand. It's going to feel that exact same way, with one team coming out to just vicious boos.
And it's going to be it's going to be one of those fun ones to watch too.
Yeah.
Just because of such a historical rivalry. Like, shit dates back to like 18 something.
Yeah. And so even if the Excelsior are constantly better than the Boston Uprising, if Boston Uprising just don't improve next season and they still suck, it's still going to be an important game with a lot of fanfare simply because they're borrowing from the history of baseball and football and basketball and all these different sports, and they're basically just like importing the history and just running with it. And that's basically what they're doing this entire weekend, and it's kind of working. Like, it's going to work eventually.
Yeah, it will.
And then we move into Atlanta and Dallas, and
they've never played each other.
Yeah,
they've never played each other.
When I was going through to make a list of all the games that have been played between all the rivals, I went all the way back to Stage 1, Week 1, and then all the way up to now, and they have never met each other.
Yeah, they're
anywhere.
Never played.
And I'm pretty sure Atlanta doesn't have any rivalries in general.
They don't.
They don't in sports history. I mean, I saw something where it's like
their rivals are...
There could be NBA, but like even then it's not big.
Well, no, even the Atlanta basketball team doesn't necessarily have those games where like you need to get up for this. Like Atlanta doesn't have in basketball, or I'm not entirely sure about baseball, but definitely in basketball, they don't have a Warriors Clippers, we hate you simply because you're on that team.
Yeah.
And then Atlanta in football, they hate New Orleans. But obviously there isn't a New Orleans team. So maybe that's kind of what they're going for, is that Texas is close enough as a southern state that you can get away with it. And it's not Florida, which is like a completely different kind of southern.
Yeah.
So, you just want to go Georgia versus Texas. And maybe they just want to have a Atlanta Dallas, and they just think it's going to be a good game, and maybe this is them trying to like start up a rivalry, or maybe it was just a game you needed to fit in.
Yeah, I guess like maybe they were just like they've never played, so let's have them play. But I feel like
you had no choice but to put them on.
It feels almost like they should have had Philly play instead, because Philly has more rivals like in real life, like in other sports,
no, Atlanta,
like football.
Philly would have been the best.
Like Philly versus Dallas, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Yes. No, Philly. It's weird because...
And Philly versus New York is a thing in, like, sports
Philadelphia should have been in this weekend if we're talking about just rivals, because Philly and Dallas especially, Cowboys, Eagles, is probably some of the most hatred you'll ever see in sports. And even Philly-Boston would have been a great series, because Philly-Boston has a recent history, especially with the NBA, where both of those teams hate each other, and you could have really played off that. And even Philly-London is an Overwatch League rivalry, because they did meet in the grand finals. Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be something that those teams have against each other, is you beat us in the grand finals, we beat you in the grand finals. That's just what it is. So it's weird that Philly didn't end up making it, and that's why I think Atlanta ended up being one of those teams where it's like, we just need to fit you on the schedule. Philly's already had these games.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
And just hope that, maybe by the end of the season you hate Dallas for some reason.
I mean, there's like the Cowboys and the Falcons you were telling me about. Like,
yeah,
but that's not really
it's not a rivalry. It's just like, wow, they're good teams and they play. But it's not like Falcons versus Saints, where there's like actual I hate you energy.
Yeah.
That's just more like competitive.
It's not like the Falcons versus the Saints, or the Falcons versus the Giants, or the Falcons versus the Falcons. Damn Falcons, they ruin everything.
You're struggling this episode.
Moving on to Shock versus Titans.
It's a real rivalry.
Yeah, that's a real rivalry.
So I
was going to make a joke about myself, but this is way more important.
And it wasn't even planned to be a rivalry.
No, San Francisco and Vancouver are like the only true Overwatch League centered rivalry between like these two
that
forces.
I think like genuinely has like fuck the other side energy.
Besides LA and LA.
And Dallas and, the Texas teams. But like...
This is like actual like... I could see somebody fighting each other at like over this kind of shit. And they've only ever met 3 times, twice in playoffs, which is kind of where
every time they met
that rivalry has come from.
Crazy.
But the only other time was the stage 1 week 2, where Vancouver 3-1 the Shock. And then it was still like, well, we're figuring it out. But when the stage playoffs came, and I think what helped is the story. Like, there was a story after the first playoffs of Shock just going, like, hard to
get
be
back
like,
to them.
I'm gonna fucking destroy them this time. And I think that storyline, like the storyline that developed between the two teams from there, going like so hard in the first stage playoffs and then having this like incredible stage for the Shock and then defeating them the next time, I think that's what really helped with this, like, because it really felt like a general like rivalry. You could feel like the passion going through this like whole stage.
Yeah, it's natural competitive energy.
Yeah.
And, it's the Shock were the only team that could push the Titans, and the Titans were the only team that could push the Shock, and it was just two, gigantic forces meeting, and every game they've played has been very good, if not, greatest games ever type stuff, so these two teams are actual rivals, and I think this will carry on because yet again you have that championship history of, oh yeah, remember in stage 1, remember in stage 2, remember, and you're always going to have when they, went into the comms and each team is just like, they're broken, blah, blah, blah. Like, these two teams genuinely want to just grind each other to dust and prove who's the best.
And I think something was interesting when we had that fiasco of the Dallas Charge game over the weekend was that they showed interviews with Bumper, and it was like, you looked like you were crying after that, and he was like, I was trying to fake tears so that, and this and that, and I'm like, see, that's the type of shit where it's like, it's gonna rile up Shock fans, and like vice versa. If like Super said, I was like, oh, I was faking all that shit, and like the entire Vancouver side would be like, fuck him.
Yeah,
think that's where it's actually like a developed rivalry.
Yeah,
not
these are battles of pride. Like,
and
they're more than just games.
And it's not just a history of sports. It's actually from within the league.
Yeah,
and that's what makes it nice.
And it's weird because this coincidentally ended up being, these two great teams pushing each other and having this, like, not I hate you rivalry, where it's like, like Steelers-Ravens is like I want to injure you kind of rivalry, where like we will fight in the streets if I see you wearing the wrong colors type stuff. Steelers-Raiders. This is a competitive, we're the best, you're the best. During this game, we ain't friends. And we're going to push each other to the best. And in basketball, the Vancouver Titans basically represent the entire Pacific Northwest. They represent, Oregon, Washington, Vancouver. They represent basically that whole area. And in the NBA, you have the Golden State Warriors and the Portland Trail Blazers. And this is a relatively recent rivalry. This rivalry basically starts when kind of like Steph gets there and Damian Lillard get drafted, and Lillard's from Oakland, so every time he comes to play the Warriors, he's trying to just take their heads off. And both of these teams, every time you see that the Golden State Warriors and the Portland Trail Blazers are playing, you don't even have to think about it. It's going to be a great game. For the entire game, these two teams are just going to push each other.
Yes.
And that's what you see with the Shock and the Titans.
Yeah.
So it's another unintentional thing, but it's another like weird parallel to other sports where, this is a friendly rivalry with pride on the line. Yeah. And in the same way, the Warriors, Blazers, all of them like each other. Like, they don't really be fighting like that.
Yeah.
But when they play, it's just pure pride. Yeah. And it's just, I want to be better than you because you want to be better than me. And it's just like that weird interplay. So
yeah.
But this is definitely like the rivalry of the weekend.
This is the match of the weekend. And then we have LA versus LA, which if you're going to talk about pride, there it is.
Who owns LA, basically?
So, like, obviously, it's because they're close that the rivalry springs from.
Yeah.
And they've met 7 times, 6 in the inaugural, 1 in 2019. And surprisingly, like, 5 of their meetings go in favor of the Valiant.
Yeah, the Valiant were monsters in season 1. Like, season 1, the Valiant were the second best team in the
won
league.
stage 3 playoffs.
Yeah, no, they were the number 2 seed going into, the grand playoffs. Like, they were a force.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And it's one of those things where it's like, it's very sad when I was doing the research to be like, oh yeah, this was the Valiant. Like, rewatching some clips from their games just because I was like, damn, this was the Valiant. Really and good. Then seeing how their downfall was during this season, it was kind of depressing. And yeah, obviously, it comes from the closeness.
Yeah. It's
Houston and Dallas have the regional thing. Like, even the Bay Area and LA is a very obvious thing where it's like...
I mean, if you want to take it to, like, real sports, like baseball, you got the Oakland A's and the fucking
San Francisco Giants. And it's
Yeah,
just
like they hate each other.
But I think this rivalry is interesting compared to basically any other rivalry because this is like the same city.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Dallas and Houston, you know, San Francisco and then Southern California. You know, all the weird regional stuff going on the East Coast. You know, the Chinese teams, you know, just being in China.
Yes.
But then you look at...
being in China.
Yeah, but then you look at the LA teams and the same city.
Yeah.
And you're fighting for the same fan base. And it's a war. You know, you look at the Lakers and the Clippers, and, you know, I wonder how this is going to play out, because the Lakers and the Clippers are the A side of that equation.
Mm-hmm.
The Lakers are LA's team, and the Clippers have always been little brother.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I don't know, it might be too early to say that, but I feel like the Gladiators are becoming
the LA
Big Brother.
Team. Yeah.
And the Valiant are slowly going to become the Clippers. As just this little brother franchise that is good, and oftentimes is better than the Big Brother franchise. The Clippers have been better than the Lakers for basically this entire decade.
Yeah.
Barring the 2 years Kobe was doing Kobe things before he tore his ACL. After that...
That's not funny. I didn't, like...
Jesus Christ, dude. Or tore his Achilles.
I mean, like... But I was more laughing at the team, not him.
But, like, you know, after he tore his Achilles, the Clippers were a better team. But they never became LA's team, and they're never going to become LA's team. So I wonder if no matter how good the Valiant get, if the Gladiators are just more popular and they're the A side.
Well, another interesting thing I've noticed, and maybe this is just me reading like Reddit and like comments and like all this, but when people talk about the Gladiators, they project the Gladiators as this big masculine energy.
Yeah.
And like the shields are up, and we're
Shields
men,
up, yeah.
we're big, strong men. And then when the Valiant is portrayed in like Hongzhou Sparks art, it's always like a Valkyrie. It's feminine, and people call like, "Oh, she'll never make it off the ground." I literally saw that like earlier when they were talking about the Valiant. Like, she'll never make it. So they associate that team with like femininity, which is very like strange to me, because like I've seen it several times now where I'm like, it's kind of a thing where it's like LA Valiant is like, oh, it's just a she. It's a girl.
Yeah.
Like,
they're
and
the lower team. Yeah.
and I'm like, it's weird that's just like, that's how they associate.
And so they view like this masculine team as just simply better.
Yeah.
And no matter how good the Valiant get, I mean, they were better in season 1. Damn it!
Yes,
like they were a better team, but I feel like the Gladiators just got more fanfare. Like people cared more.
Yeah,
about the Gladiators.
I feel like if you go back to towards the beginning of this podcast, I probably made some joke about the Valiant being not so Valiant anymore.
Yeah.
And I was talking about how I hope the Gladiators improve back at the start. And now, here we are saying the Gladiators have more fans. There's a theoretically better team now.
The Valiant have playoff wins.
Yeah.
The Gladiators
Don't
have no playoff wins.
They're a fake top tier team.
Yes, and
it's
so
really weird.
And so it's just weird how that shook out, where the Gladiators are LA's team.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't see that ever changing. Just because once you set that tone, it's just going to keep going.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the Valiant are just on the unfortunate end. But their games are always going to be good.
Yeah.
Just because there is that rivalry, especially the home games, because obviously they're going to have different arenas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, Gladiators home arena is going to be different than Valiant home arena. And obviously the fans are going to come through. But it will be interesting to see if the fans, you know, if the Valiant technically have a home game and the Gladiators are technically the visitors. I wonder if there will just be more Gladiator fans anyway.
Yeah.
Like, that's a weird dynamic to see who the fan bases show out for more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's funny because like you said, once the ball gets rolling, it kind of never stops. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the same thing can be said about like Shanghai, like in the opposite direction. Like people assume they're bad, but they don't anymore. They're kind of like, they were the underdog story. They're like, yay. And they have a great fan base because of that. I don't know if any other team in the Overwatch League will be able to pull that off, just because Shanghai Dragons will always be known for that. Even if like another team has the longest running loss streak, they're going to be the new Shanghai. Like, that's what people are going to call them. Like, it's still going to be associated with Shanghai.
Yeah, even when Valiant was on their 7 losing streak, people were like, oh, here comes the new Shanghai.
Yeah, like, it's just a thing that people are going to say. So, at some point, everyone's just going to, like, insinuate that one team is the real LA team.
Yeah.
And they're going to be the ones that people like more. And that's
on Shanghai, of the first day of the weekend,
is
Shanghai versus the Spark.
Sure.
Yeah, so they've met once, with Spark winning. And I personally don't think this is the true rivalry. Some of it could be social media, just how they project themselves both on social media. But I feel like the Spark is more so a rival with the Charge, in my opinion. And I feel like the Dragons, being around so much longer, would probably find more of a rivalry with, like, Shock, in my opinion. And then, historically, maybe it's their closeness in China that leads to the rivalry.
Obviously.
'Cause
3 Chinese teams.
No, I'm saying, like, literally, they're across the bay from each other. Hangzhou and Shanghai are literally across the bay from each other. And I thought maybe company-based, the sponsors, Bibli.
You just said Hangzhou. Oh, yeah, Hangzhou Spark. I'm sorry.
Jesus Christ, Nathan. Billy, and then, like, NetEase, maybe, because they both kind of do the similar thing. Maybe that kind of leads to this rivalry. I mean, China does have, like, football leagues and other sports, like basketball, but I think, if anything, it might come just from League of Legends. And, like, the history of China and League of Legends. Because Billy, like, has a League of Legends team in China. So I don't know if there's, like, a sponsor we don't know about with Shanghai, or that they associate with people from a League of Legends league in China.
Yeah, I feel like this is, like, some shit that's just too deep for, like, us to really understand.
I mean, I went back and I mean,
like, with that thing, they're across the bay. Like, that's Oakland, San Francisco. Like, that's... Yeah. There's got to be a thing with that.
Yeah, but I think this is one of those deals where, like, if you hit up somebody that really gets, like, Chinese dynamics...
Sure.
And has been following, like, Chinese Overwatch and Chinese esports as a whole, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, this is some big deal type stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. Obviously, we didn't follow much competitive Overwatch before the league started.
Yeah.
But it's the same kind of deal with when Shanghai played the Titans.
Mm-hmm.
There was this, like, Wolf posted this long Twitter thread where it was just like this deep history between these two teams that, in the Overwatch League, it's like, yeah, Titans and Shanghai, like, who gives a fuck? Sure. But then you look at the history and it's like, this is, the Titans' chance to prove themselves, and this is Shanghai's chance to prove themselves, and they met in Apex and all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something like
and
that.
So I guarantee that there's, obviously the location is close, but I guarantee there's some, like, deeper, aspect to this that makes it a more compelling game than maybe the Spark in Guangzhou or something like that. But obviously with Overwatch, Overwatch League, I think these Chinese teams, they've only really met once. Like, they didn't have a chance to actually play a lot. And so I think next season we will actually get to see the fruits of, like, this rivalry, because then they will be playing home and away games. It'll be so many times a year. You're getting your home games, and then you get to play them away twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a little bit more dynamic, and the games are going to be more focused on. I feel like the Spark versus Dragons, we don't remember that game.
No, I don't.
If I walked up to even the most ardent Overwatch League fan, they don't remember that game.
I'm pretty sure it was the game that it was the first day of the first week of the first stage.
Yeah, no one remembers that. But during a homestand,
you're gonna remember
when you have the crowd riled up and you're hyping it, and it's, like, their weekend, you're gonna remember it because there is going to be that energy and that rivalry aspect.
And especially seeing how Hangzhou's, like, turnout is when they have watch parties.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they fill out mall plazas for people to watch. So I feel like in the end it will become, like, a very good rivalry, and it helps that they are so close, so when they do have the games they can just literally go across
Yeah.
from each like they're literally across from
They
each
should
other.
just build an arena in the middle of the bay for that,
Oh, that'd be
for the express purpose, and half of it's pink, half of it's red.
I mean, Chinese money. I guarantee somebody has that kind of money to just be like, screw it.
yeah.
Like, some crazy investor.
And let's move into the next game, which is Atlanta versus Boston. This is another not necessary match. Like,
Yeah.
just have Philly play this weekend. They have more real world rivals. They have
So-
more in fucking Overwatch rivals.
They've only met once again, and Boston was the victor. It's not really a sports rivalry, like we said. There's no actual true rivals for
Not really.
Atlanta in the league right now.
Atlanta is just friends with everyone.
But if I were to say, if they really wanted Atlanta to play, they should have put in, like, Washington. I feel like Atlanta and Washington have more of a rivalry.
See,
because...
but that's more of a rivalry in this stage, just because they were two, like, whatever teams.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like...
Like, I don't think it's, like, an actual, like, like, even Washington, I feel like they're, if you wanted to mess around and just kind of, like, talk about, like, a general sports thing.
Maybe the reason no one fucks with Atlanta is that's where the CDC is.
Maybe. Like, you don't want to release noxious diseases.
Maybe.
Yeah, but, like, Washington even doesn't really have a natural rivalry against Atlanta. Like, if you wanted to just go sports, you go, like, DC versus Boston, like...
Yeah.
Like, you mess around with something like that.
Boston could have played
Even
Washington.
Even Washington versus Dallas is still, like, a natural sports rivalry because it's it's the Washington football team and then the Cowboys.
Even
it's a
Atlanta...
thing.
Even Boston versus Paris would have been better.
Yeah. So
to be honest.
Atlanta's still just finding their way because they don't have that natural...
Rival.
Oh, hey, look, this sport and this sport, these cities hate each other. They just don't have that.
Yeah.
But Washington, rain, I do think part of it is Dallas and Uprising are two of the teams in the league that feature prominently English-speaking Western players.
Yeah.
Sure.
And, Reigns obviously has, like, Korean dudes, but they also, featured popular Western players.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's sort of a thing where it's like, all right, we're going to put Reign against other Western teams instead of Reign against an all-Korean roster,
Mm-hmm.
where you might not have that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like the only thing I can think of with the Reign is that, all right, well, let's just put them against the two most Western teams
Yeah.
that aren't the Paris Eternal.
It's almost like the Atlanta homestand again, where it's like, let's give them some easy matches, guys. These guys
Yeah.
are already out, and you guys are basically already in.
Yeah.
It's like it has that same kind of vibe where I'm like, they went real easy on Atlanta again.
Yeah, Atlanta's getting, like, this feature spot in this weekend, and it's like, but y'all ain't got no, like, rivals. Like, where's London? Like, London, Paris.
Sure.
Like, do that.
Yeah.
That's been a long time coming.
Yeah, that's an actual regional, right? Like, do London, Paris, It's just weird where it's like, why Atlanta?
Why Atlanta?
Yeah. Why?
And that we're gonna get like 100 tweets at us, like
Actually,
explaining
Atlanta.
why
Yeah.
Atlanta
Yeah.
is like this deep-seated hatred towards everywhere else, but it's a
Yeah.
thing only people from Atlanta know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like maybe
The fuck?
people in Atlanta just hate Boston.
Hateful.
Like, who knows?
Disclaimer: we do not think Atlanta is filled with hate-filled people.
No, Atlanta's great.
Anyways, NYXL versus the Titans.
They met once
They have played each other once.
in the playoffs.
Yeah, New
In the
York's another
playoffs.
team that they have like sports rivalries, and so you can lean on like the
So-
city history.
Yeah.
They don't have like a rivalry.
Oh, so I actually,
it's America versus Canada. Like,
yeah, that's what I have. I was like, maybe it's USA versus Canada because New York is synonymous with the U.S. and Vancouver being Canada.
Like Uprising, they're
But
from
yeah,
DC.
yeah,
yeah.
They're America as you can get.
yeah.
Did you just say Uprising is from DC?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, I mean the Justice.
Yeah,
Yes.
but
Washington's real world sports team is problematic, so we're not going to include them. In
Yeah,
this.
they're the Washington football team.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Washington, change your fucking names.
But I did look when I was looking at sports to see if there was any like weird obscure tennis or some shit rivalries.
Is there a tennis rivalry? Please tell me there's a tennis rivalry.
No, there's a soccer.
Okay.
So there's a soccer rivalry between New York and Vancouver, and it's like a heated one. Like, it's actually really heated.
Ah.
I didn't go further into it, but I just saw, like, a bunch
This
of
is
people...
America. Of course you didn't go deeper into
Yeah,
soccer.
it was just, like, there was multiple things that was, like, Vancouver and New York hate each other for soccer, and then in the middle it was, like, New York and Seoul Dynasty, the true rivals of the Overwatch League, and I was like...
That's a rivalry.
And I was like, that's an actual... That's, like... I was like, wait a second, that brings up a good point. Seoul should be in here, because they have rivalries with Shock that's been developed, and then they have the rivalry with New York, and that would have been way better than just trying to throw... Atlanta in here.
New York's actual rivals are Seoul and London.
Yeah.
Those are the actual rivalry games. And obviously, yet again, this is another one where there very well could be a deeper history in Apex that we just don't know.
Sure.
However, yet again, I think most of the people that are watching didn't watch Apex.
Yeah.
And that's why they made the Overwatch League. And so it's not something that everybody's going to be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, these are supposed to be rivals that people are familiar with. Like, I think this was just another one where New York has rivalries with Seoul and London that we believe are real. But then I feel like New York has been so unbelievably good in the first season and second season.
Fair.
That their rivalries are just like...
Any good team.
Yeah, they're just like, whoever's good... You're our rivals right now.
Yeah.
You know, because they've been historically the best Overwatch League team.
They're the fucking Goku of the Overwatch League.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, you're strong.
I'll fight you.
We hate you. Yeah, like let's go.
I think also...
Go ahead. It's not that good.
Good.
Have they ever been that good?
They used to be. I don't know what happened.
I think it's just interesting that there is some things, talking about Apex, where like we won't know ever anything about it. And it's also interesting to see with this new season, they hardly ever bring up Apex anymore.
They did it in the first season.
But in the first season, it was like every other game. They were like, these people were big in Apex.
I mean, that's the only history you had to draw from.
And everybody was really like, well, you know, like, we didn't really watch Apex. Like, you could watch, like, the Twitch chat going, and it's like, well, we never really watched Apex. And then there's the one dude who was like, I watched Apex. You guys suck. And it's like, well, yeah, but we didn't have time to stay up and watch a stream from halfway across the world.
I mean, Apex was important, and obviously there's a lot of history, and if you really go back and watch those games, they're good games.
Yeah.
However, in Season 1, that's the only history you had to draw from. You couldn't draw from last season because there was no last season, first season. This season, you have a season of history to draw from, so you need to play off your own history and throw little spurts of history, like, oh yeah, you know, like, on Seoul, there are only, like, 2 dudes that are left from the Apex team that was brought over that was made into the Seoul Dynasty in the first season. There's only, a couple dudes left. That's something interesting, but as these things go on and players retire and they pick up new rosters, you need to build off of the New York Excelsior history, the Seoul Dynasty history.
Yes.
Apparently, the New York Excelsior and Titans have a history.
Yeah.
But I think it's also just, you know, New York wants to run fade on every good team.
And again, I feel like it's the most hyped match because they talked about it several times where they were like,
I mean,
New York
I'm more hyped for Shock and Titans, but that's fair.
Yeah, but this is 1 and 2 in standings.
New York and Vancouver has been talked about how they want them to play and like meet and like want to see something amazing, especially now that Vancouver's kind of like on that bottom swing of things. They're vulnerable. It wasn't like when they first met.
King Kong's only got one arm left on the Empire State Building.
New York is also unbelievably vulnerable.
Yes.
So
it's still one arm, but it's one arm.
So it's both very I think it's a good matchup.
Yeah, no, it's
and
great,
it was fun finding out that there's like a deep hatred between like the soccer fans of New York and Vancouver.
Yeah.
And there's some hockey.
Fuck plays soccer in either of those places.
It's also interesting because
there's hockey too, but it's like
but it's also interesting because this, like, assuming this is like the MLS, the Major League Soccer League, like, even soccer fans I know are like, bro, we don't watch the MLS. So, like, apparently there are these super aggressive, like, soccer fans in the United States that follow the MLS and are like, yeah, we need a room. Like, that's the most interesting part to me.
It was intense figuring this out.
Because soccer fans I know are like, dude, just watch Premier League, watch UEFA Champions League, watch Bundesliga, like, watch anything other than MLS, dude. So that's like a weird...
Yeah.
That's a weird rivalry to me.
And then the final match is the California Cup. We got Shock versus Valiant, NorCal versus SoCal.
Yeah, this is the real...
This is personally my favorite matchup, just because they have played, including the Cali Cup, which is what kind of started this, I think, put this envisionment of, like, rivalries out there. They've met, like, 9 times, like, including that off-season. And, like, within those 9 meetings, like, 6 of the times Valiant have won. It's only recently that Shock has steamrolled them, which is...
It's reflective of the seasons in general.
Yeah.
Valiant used to be much better than the Shock. They are no longer much better than the Shock.
Yeah, and it's another thing where the very first game of the first season of the Overwatch League is Shock Valiant.
Yep.
Yeah, it was in that preseason game.
So they're forever rivals because the first game of this entire shit is Shock Valiant.
And I think these two teams have that, like, perfect blend of, like, the Vancouver and Shock have this, like, aggressive kind of, like, pride rivalry, but I generally think that the Shock and Valiant has this, like, friendly rivalry where, like, everybody in the Shock is really cool with space.
Yeah,
and,
no,
like,
they're all friends.
all these other dudes where it's like I can see them all just hanging out, going and getting dinner together, and then, like, it's like a friendly rivalry. It's so much. It's like there's a different vibe around this than there is against, like, Shock and Vancouver. When I watch a Shock and Vancouver fight, I want Shock to beat the shit out of the Titans. But when I watch the Valiant Shock, I'm like, I would be happy with either of these teams winning.
Yeah, like it's a really nice rivalry, and it is like it's going to forever be a full circle thing.
Yeah, and it has the history in the league because it was the very first, like, one of the very first matches to ever be put on stage.
They played in the off season. Like, they had just a showcase day in the off season.
Yeah, where they played in Santa Ana and Oakland.
Yeah,
like,
so it's an actual thing, and these two teams have kind of a synergistic relationship where the Shock and the Valiant are aggressive competitors, but they do have that relationship where everybody on both teams are cool with each other.
Yes.
They're all friends. You know, the organizations don't necessarily hate each other like crazy. It's just one of those, we're NorCal, you're SoCal. What's good, homie?
What's good?
And I think it's interesting that the Valiant got that.
And not the Gladiators.
Yeah. Well, again, it comes from the Valiant used to be the better team out of the two LA teams.
I think it also comes from the Gladiators just seem to have, like, a bravado. They're like, we are this, and this is what we're gonna do. And they don't seem as social. Like, Shock has a very social, like, social media. They're very social, and they're very out there with, like, everything.
Bruh, the big geese.
And I know, but I'm saying that happened now.
I get what you mean.
Valiant was the same way in the first season where they were like, hey, like, we're going to be really social with it. They do all these, like, things. They seem to be very much in contact with, like, what's happening.
And then season 1 Gladiators is like Fissure just being angry all the time.
Yeah, Gladiators was such a hard ass the first season, and now they're kind of like, especially with Big Goose as like the
Gladiators
face.
have warmed up, and I think in the future a rivalry could develop there, but I think it'll always be more Shock versus Valiant, and that's the one that people are going to remember. That's the one that Shock and the LA teams are going to care about. Yeah. Like, I'm sure you could just be like, oh, Shock play both LA teams. Okay, Shock won the California Cup again. Like, that's not fun. Like, Shock versus LA Valiant is better, and, like, I'm hoping these next 3 games Shock wins, and then we can have, like, that final, like, ooh, it's the tiebreaker. Yeah. It's coming to it. Like,
when
that's
the Valiant beat the Shock, it's going to be a big deal. Because then it's the California Cup. But it's weird because this is another rivalry that's, like, I don't think they intended on it being this direct parallel to the NBA. Yeah. Which I believe the Overwatch League is directly influenced by the NBA in all aspects of their life. Sure.
Another thing I was going to say, even though it's like, why not the Gladiators? But again, we've gone over they used to not be as good as they are, and they used to be not as interesting as they are. But, like, from California, like, the 2 big cities that people know about, like, if you ask them from other areas, or San Francisco and LA. Like,
easy, yeah.
Who's going to be like, Sacramento, you know, the capital. fucking kids who are born here, like of the state capital, San Francisco. Like,
and so it's like,
I mean, we're uneducated.
It's
But
like
go on.
It's like the Warriors and Clippers. So
Yeah.
the Warriors have this rivalry with the Clippers, but not the Lakers. Like the Warriors play the Lakers, and it's like, oh, cool. Like,
And look, it's even more of a parallel. You're saying
Yes.
Valiant are the Clippers.
they are the Clippers, and it's the Warriors have this rivalry with
And
the
isn't-
Clippers, and it's more aggressive. It's a more like the Warriors and Clippers just basically want to fight each other at all times,
Yeah.
regardless. But even this season, when things were a little bit more friendly, and the Clippers had like this mob of just like Lou Williams and Harrell and just all these dudes that are good at basketball and just work together. Even though they don't want to fight each other in the locker room before the game, there's still that rivalry of, you're the Clippers, run that fade, homie.
Yeah.
And the Shock are rivals with the Clippers of the Overwatch League instead of the Lakers of the Overwatch League.
It's ironic that the Gladiators' colors is also purple.
Yeah.
That is fucking crazy. I hadn't thought about that.
This is a thing. Like, I feel like, I don't know if they did this on purpose.
Yeah, no.
But
when you started bringing it up, I
became
started
that.
thinking that. Yeah.
So, the Warriors and Clippers, Shock, Valiant. It's just another, like, funny parallel to actual sports, and specifically the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be surprised if in, like, a year or two, they're just like, yeah, dog, we tried to be like the NBA. I wouldn't be surprised if they, like, mess around and start doing other NBA type things. Like,
Yeah.
Like the quirky halftime shows or
They've
all that
already
other
kind
crap.
of been doing that.
Yeah,
Like,
these 1v1s and stuff.
they started kind of already, like, itching that in there.
So it's just another weird rivalry that's like, wow, okay, like,
Yeah.
just things naturally fall into place. The Bay Area hates Los Angeles.
But we also get along with, like, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
There's like a mutual, like, love-hate relationship with, like, Northern California and the Southern California. Because it's like, we have San Francisco, we attract tourists. You have Disneyland, you attract tourists. Let's all make money together.
Sure.
But Anaheim's mad now.
Poor Anaheim. Is it, like,
No,
does anyone
Anaheim
ever...
exists.
Alright, before we end this, does anyone actually be like, yo, let's go to Anaheim for Disneyland? You're just saying, we're going to LA for a weekend.
I really want to know, like, people if any of our listeners are from outside California, please go to either our Twitter or Instagram or social media at ScrapyardMedia and tweet at us if you even knew that Disneyland was in a place that wasn't LA.
Yeah.
People just say, oh, we're in LA.
And if you did, how did you know? Because that's important too. That's
And
important
also,
context.
half the time when you're in LA at one of these, like, things, you're not just staying in Anaheim to go to Disneyland. Sometimes you go to Universal. Sometimes you go to the other, like, Hollywood-centered bullshit.
Bro, keep in mind, she has a friend that goes to Disneyland every day.
Yo, real
So
quick.
Taylor's a little
Every
biased on this
Yeah,
whole
Taylor is
Disney
very,
stuff.
very biased.
She's all about the
But
house
also,
and mouse.
apparently the guy who owns because I was trying to see if there was any connection between the Gladiators and the,
Lakers.
yes. No, but apparently the guy who owns them, it's brothers, I think, but he owns Kroenke? Kroenke?
Yeah.
Sports and Entertainment, which controls the Los Angeles Rams, so that's
Yeah,
something.
Kroenke... Alright, before we go, here's some things y'all need to know about fucking Kroenke. I think if he walked into St. Louis right now, he would get assassinated. Because the Rams were moved from St. Louis right when they started getting good to LA. And I'm pretty sure Rams fans want his head. So,
That's fair.
if your team gets moved to frickin' Oklahoma City or something, it's gonna be depressing.
Yeah.
Because your owner is is kind of a dirtbag. I don't know all the stories like off the top of my head. However, I do know Kroenke has a bad reputation.
Yeah.
We'll say that, but and another weird parallel between LA and the Bay Area, Shaquille O'Neal has, I believe, an ownership stake in Energy, which owns the Shock. And Shaquille O'Neal is a Lakers legend.
Yeah.
There's these weird little through
it's
lines
weird.
going on.
Michael Strahan also is a part of Energy, and so is J-Lo.
Damn, man.
Hey, we got the best people.
We got the stars.
And on that note, with our superiority in check, we will end this episode. And remember, if you want to dispute any of that with us or tell us that you knew Disney was in Anaheim because you're better than people in California, us hood rats from the Bay, go ahead and do that on our social media at Twitter or Instagram, all at ScrapyardMedia. You can also find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, and especially where you're listening right now. What's that name?
Scrapyard Media.
Great. And Xavier, if they want to play video games with us on platforms such as Xbox, PlayStation, and Steam, where could they find us?
Scrapyard Media.
Roll outro.